Assalamu Alaikum. Hello kids, how are you today? Are you enjoying our videos? I know you are. I hope you are learning a lot from our videos as well. Insha'Allah, today I am going to tell you the story of Prophet Yaqub alayhi salam. Now listen carefully. Bismillah. The story of Prophet Yaqub alayhi salam. Yaqub alayhi salam continued to work for his uncle for 20 long years. Laban's wealth had increased substantially because of the Prophet. But he was now missing his family very much, and he wanted to go back to them. One day, the Prophet asked his permission to return to his family. Laban agreed and promised him reward for working so hard. "Give me each speckled, spotted and black lambs that were born this year," said Yaqub alayhi salam. Laban agreed, and the Prophet walked away happily. But Laban had grown greedy by now. He was not willing to part with the sheep he owned. He asked his sons to take away all the speckled, spotted and black sheep from the flock. When Yaqub alayhi salam woke up in the morning, he realized that he had been tricked by his uncle. But Laban's trick didn't help him at all. When the sheep bred, most of them were born black or speckled. This was a miracle. When Laban saw this, he was angry. He had promised all the black lambs to Yaqub alayhi salam. One day, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala asked the Prophet to return to his country. The Prophet asked his wives and children to start packing as they were about to leave Haran. He took everything that belonged to him, including the spotted and black lambs. The Prophet did not tell Laban about his plans. He knew that his uncle would trick him into staying back, and knew that his uncle would never let him take his share of cattle. When Laban realized that Yaqub had taken his belongings and left Haran, he was very angry. So he took his people and followed Yaqub alayhi salam before they reached far. Laban and his team followed the tracks of the Prophet, and soon they caught up with him. "Why did you leave without my knowledge?" asked Laban. "If you had told me that you were leaving, we could have celebrated this occasion with a feast, and I could have bid farewell to my daughters as well." The Prophet somehow convinced his uncle, and they decided they will no longer interfere in the affairs of others. They sat on a hill called Galid, and they made a covenant there. It was decided that neither of them would enter the land of the other from that day. Then they cooked food and ate it together. Then each bade the other farewell as they departed, returning to their own country. The Prophet and his family walked, then started traveling towards his country. One day, at the break of dawn, the Prophet was sitting outside his tent. It was then that an angel appeared before him in the shape of a man. Then the angel started to wrestle with the Prophet. They fought neck and neck until the angel injured the Prophet's thigh, and the Prophet became lame. The sun had started rising up by now, and the angel asked him, "What is your name?" "Yaqub," replied the Prophet. "From this day you shall be called Israel," said the angel, and vanished into thin air. The Prophet could not believe his eyes, and he realized that the man was actually an angel. The Prophet and his family continued through their journey. When they reached the land known as Seir, he sent a messenger to Esau asking forgiveness. But the messenger returned with bad news. He informed the Prophet that Esau was riding toward him with some 400 men. The Prophet realized that his brother had still not forgiven him. He was afraid. So he prayed to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, seeking his help. The Prophet then prepared a great present for his brother. He asked his servants to take 200 goats, 200 ewes, 30 camels, and many other animals along with them. He asked them to go ahead before him. "When you meet my brother," he said, "he will ask you who you are, and you should say they belong to your servant Yaqub, and the animals are the present for his master Esau." The Prophet waited for 2 more days and then rode toward his country. Esau met Yaqub's slaves, and he was very impressed when they delivered the message. He was happy that his brother was giving him so much cattle. And then Esau saw his brother approaching. Yaqub alayhi salam prostrated to him as a sign of salutation. Esau was very happy when he saw this, and he had tears in his eyes. He hugged his brother and sought forgiveness for being angry with him for all these years. "Who are these people with you?" asked Esau when he saw the women and children. "They were given to me by our God," said the Prophet humbly. Leah, Rachel, the children, and all his slaves came and prostrated before Esau as a sign of respect. Esau refused to accept the gifts at first, but the Prophet insisted, and he had to accept them at last. All of them started traveling back to their country, and they were led by none other than Esau. On their way back, the Prophet camped near Jerusalem. It was here that the Prophet had poured the oil on a rock years ago. He then built a mosque as he had promised. Prophet Yaqub alayhi salam had 12 sons in total, and Yusuf was among them. He grew up into a handsome and devoted man. They migrated to Egypt, and they lived there for 17 years. And after living and preaching about God for a long time, the Prophet died at the age of 147.